Palisade Radio is brought to you by First Majestic Silver Corp., one of the world's purest and fastest growing silver mining companies.
Welcome back to another episode of Palisade Radio. This is your host, Colin Cattell, and returning back on the show with us today is Jeff Berwick. He's the founder and editor of the Dollar Vigilante, which can be found at thedollarvigilante.com, and also is throwing the Anarchapulco conference in February. Jeff, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Colin. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, and I came down to visit you a few weeks ago in Acapulco. Many of our listeners know that as we put together an interview about gold stocks. Thanks again for the visit there, and I know now why you find yourself in that part of the world. Truly a nice place. And I thought today, as the year comes to an end, we could have a discussion about general market trends. Let's start off with the Fed rate hike coming up, and the market certainly selling off a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. As you know, I predicted over the summer that we're going to see a fall, the beginning of a crisis beginning in the fall. And of course, in September, there was many things happening. And the end of August, actually, just before fall began, was some major market collapses around the world. And that has continued in many places, even recently in the U.S. Now we're starting to see the markets really come off this week. We're seeing China, year to date, the Chinese market's down 30%, Germany down 13%, Spain down 15%. Malaysia 17%, Colombia 30%, Peru 40%, Greece 30%. So we're looking at a lot of markets having a very bad year to end the year. And so a lot of the speculation and a lot of the eyes have been on what the Federal Reserve is going to do after 9.5 years of not raising interest rates, which is complete Keynesian insanity. And the fact that everyone is so concerned about a 0.25% interest rate hike that could collapse the entire system just goes to show just how close to the edge the system is. There's so much debt built into the system that even just a small 0.25% interest rate hike could cause calamity, and people are preparing for that now. We'll see what happens. Of course, it's insanity that we have one person, Janet Yellen, that everyone in the world watches to decide which way the markets are going to go, but that's what happens in a communist-style centrally planned system such as the Federal Reserve and our monetary system today. But if you look at everything that's going on, this is looking like pre-2008 down to pretty much exactly. You look at oil, the price of oil, of course, has been off dramatically in the last year, and even in the last few weeks, it's down close to $35 as we speak. The last time it was that low was just before the crisis or collapse in 2008. We're seeing copper now near $2. That's the last time it was that low was just before the market crash of 2008. We're seeing the shipping index, the Baltic Dry Index shipping index, essentially at all-time lows right now. So that last time that happened was just before the crash in 2008. This should be starting to become very obvious to many people what's going on. And I've even said, and we're very close to the end of the fall now with just a few weeks left or less than a few weeks left. And I still expect more chaos and crisis to happen, and I expect that going into 2016, it's going to be something that will shock the world.
And despite major market collapses underway around the world, the U.S. dollar hegemony and the U.S. stock market, which has held up pretty well, at least relative to the other markets around the world, is giving the perception to at least Americans that I know in the U.S. media that nothing is wrong yet. Can you touch on that a bit, Jeff?
Yeah, the U.S. markets haven't fully cracked yet, and a lot of money's been flowing into the U.S. dollar as all these other markets start to collapse. So it has forestalled a collapse in the U.S. so far to date, but it's not going to last too much longer. We've seen just in the last week the dollar finally starting to have a bit of a move down for the first time in a long time, and that is actually what's been causing a lot of the market problems all week. We could be seeing the end of of this rise in the U.S. dollar coming soon, and that will dramatically affect the U.S. markets. We're also seeing the rest of the world moving away from the dollar, so that's going to hurt the dollar dramatically over time. We've seen the Chinese yuan just added to the special drawing rights list of the IMF just this month. That's a big move as well. Russia and China are accumulating gold. They're also selling treasuries, and many countries around the world are moving away from using the dollar in trade. So everything's looking bad for the dollar in the coming year, and it will cause major market strife. And as for people who say that the U.S. is still okay, they're looking at a lot of numbers that are from the government, which are totally wrong, such as unemployment. There's more people that are out of the workforce now than I think in 30 years. They've learned how to massage and manipulate and propagandize the numbers so much now, but the amount of people on food stamps, for example, is still close to 50 million. Nearly 1 in 6 people in the U.S. can't afford to eat without government assistance. This is not a good economy. It's a false economy. The market stayed up because of money printing and because of people moving into the dollar as other areas of the world collapse. But it has nothing to do with a good economy in the U.S., and it's only going to get worse from here, especially if they raise rates.
Yep, and you mentioned to me before we got on this call that the dollar is maybe starting to crack, which I didn't even realize, because a lot of the assets that I hold in the mining stocks that I'm in are in Canadian dollars, which is oftentimes very tied to the dollar and is very weak right now against the U.S. dollar. But the dollar is starting to come off a little bit. We don't know what's going to happen next. Do you think that the top is in?
Well, it's really hard to say. There's so many variables going on. I think the euro is going to have massive problems in the coming months, so that could actually drive the dollar higher because people will be panicking and trying to get out of euros. The Eurozone itself is on the brink of collapse. It's been said by nearly everyone and any major person in Europe that it's very close to collapsing right now. Many countries are putting up borders again, so anything could happen. Of course, the European countries, so many of them are beyond bankrupt. Greece still hasn't been solved. They just keep putting them further and further into debt. And then there's places like Spain, Italy, Portugal, France. They're all in terrible shape. So I believe in Spain, the amount of younger people who are unemployed is over 50%. The economy is just absolutely horrendous. So we're going to see so many things going on. It's definitely going to be volatile, and I think that's what we're starting to see now. And that's why I really recommend to people to get into outside of the financial system and monetary system and into more hard assets, including precious metals. Get into some gold and silver mining stocks like you do, but not a massive amount, I don't think, because it's a little too risky. But definitely it has the potential to have huge upside potential for speculation. And of course, things like Bitcoin, which we recommend quite heavily over the summer, around 230, and it's currently around 440, I believe.
So let's go through each of those different asset classes and talk about recent happenings. Bitcoin's been forming a nice base that you've been talking about on the Dollar Vigilante for the past couple of months. It started to rally. I haven't watched it of late, but what's going on with Bitcoin?
Well, lots been going on, but I'm not sure how much of it's related to the price. For example, the Wired and Gizmodo came out and said they found Satoshi Nakamoto again. This is about the 10th time that some media outlets have said they found him. That was interesting. But the interesting part about that was they said it was an Australian guy this time, and then within hours, the Australian government raided his house looking for his Bitcoin, because if he is Satoshi Nakamoto is said to have about $400 million worth of Bitcoins at this current level. So the Australian government, who's in dire straits, the economy's doing bad. The Australian dollar's off about 30% in the last year and a half, and a very commodities-based country is in a lot of problems, and so they're trying to abscond if they can find his Bitcoin. But as far as the price, it's been rising dramatically. It was 230 around August. It spiked above 400 briefly about a month ago, and then it bounced bounced back to 300. And actually, at the Dollar Vigilante, we sent out an alert right on the exact day, which I believe was November 11th, I believe, and said that 300 looks like the bottom for this rebound, and it's now at 444 as we speak. So, I think I've said for a while, I think the upside in Bitcoin is tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars per Bitcoin, or even millions of dollars per Bitcoin if it becomes a used currency around the world. And as we start to have banks collapse, as we start to have central banks go into negative interest rates, which we're seeing now throughout Europe, the Bank of Canada just this week said negative interest rates are an option on the table. As people start to see that, they will start to move outside of the fiat currency system. And if they're smart, they'll be moving some of their fiat currency into precious metals and Bitcoin. And Bitcoin, because it's such a small market, has the potential, if the same amount of money, for example, went into Bitcoin as went into gold or silver, Bitcoin would go up thousands of percent, whereas gold and silver might only go up tens or 100%.
Jeff, I want to ask you a little bit more about Bitcoin, because I've heard a lot of arguments against it, but the only viable argument that I've ever heard against it is what happens in a crisis situation if the power grid goes out or the internet goes down. I know that would have a lot more ramifications than just not being able to use your Bitcoins, but looking at that against something like silver or gold, do you still see the merits in the Bitcoin?
Well, absolutely, but I think you should hold both. I've always said that. I think I hold more gold and silver than I do Bitcoin, and the reason I do is because, like I said, if Bitcoin does what I think it could do, it could go up thousands or tens of thousands of percent or hundreds of thousands of percent, whereas gold and silver would never do that in today's dollars anyway, because that would just be a massive amount. But because Bitcoin is so small, it could rise by that much. So it really has upside potential, incredible exponential upside potential. But it also could go to zero. It is a new currency. It's only a little over 6 years old now. So it still has a lot of growing to do and a lot of acceptance to be undertaken by people around the world. So I really recommend that people have a small percentage of their assets in Bitcoin. It's not only is it a great potential store of wealth, especially when it's going up dramatically as it is now, but it also has so many benefits over the banking system. You can send literally $1 billion worth of Bitcoin to China right now in 2 seconds, and it wouldn't cost you anything, and no government could stop it. That has a lot of value. As far as the power going out, and that is a possibility. We've heard about EMP attacks warning. We've seen NORAD move back into the Cheyenne Mountains this year because they said they're concerned about an EMP attack. Of course, that EMP attack could come from the U.S. government itself, another false flag attack, or it could come from Russia, which we're getting close to World War III right now in Syria, with a Russian airliner being shot down last month, and then a Russian jet being shot down by a NATO member, Turkey, a couple of weeks ago. We have the U.S., Russia, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Syria, Israel, and France, and the U.K. all flying around Syria right now with jets, and they say they're fighting different people, or they say they're fighting the same people, ISIS, but they're not. The West is fighting for ISIS and Al-Qaeda, which should be a real wake-up call to people out there, and Russia is fighting to protect the Syrian government, who's under attack from these ISIS and Al-Qaeda and all the groups that the U.S. backs trying to overtake Syria. So we're close to complete all-out nuclear war right now, which is really interesting, and hardly anyone seems to notice or care. So yeah, there is a potential of an EMP attack, not to mention the sun every about 100 years has a major EMP, and that can wipe out electrical grids across continents. So people should be have that as aware of as a risk. But as far as people saying that's the main reason not to own Bitcoin, well, I think if we really have an EMP attack or an EMP surge from the sun, that if it knocks out the power throughout all of North and South America, for example, I think we'll have way bigger problems than gold, silver, or Bitcoin at that moment in time. It would be complete chaos. So but at the same time, I should mention, you can actually still run Bitcoin without having power. You can actually do all the calculations manually, but that probably is not something that most people know how to do, or something that probably would happen anytime soon if we had an EMP attack, but it is a possibility.
Okay, and then on gold and silver, I don't want to ask you if the bottom's in, because nobody knows the answer to that, but I think that the bottom has been in a lot of currencies. I mean, certain currencies that are down against the US dollar 20, 30, 40% over the last year or two. It'd be hard to imagine gold making new lows in those currencies for this part of the bull market, I should say. Jeff, do you think when the US dollar comes off that gold will finally take off? Is that everything and the only thing holding it down at this point?
Well, I think there's many things to it. Definitely the paper price is manipulated dramatically, and we're seeing that it's been, this summer, for example, I wrote that it was very hard to find silver to buy, even here in Mexico, where this is where most silver is mined in Mexico. You couldn't find any silver coins to buy at any of the banks or the mint or anything for months. And even still to this day, it's very hard to find silver coins. And when you do buy them, it's at 10, 20, or 30% above the paper price. So, they have the paper price of gold and silver very under control, very manipulated. The physical price is totally different. We're going to see a divergence there. And as we start to see collapse and crisis happening throughout the Eurozone, probably Japan as well, including into Canada, Australia, the US, we're going to see all kinds of crisis happen in 2016. We're going to see a lot of people trying to get into physical metals. And I predict, and I've said this for a while, that at some point you won't be able to buy the physical metals for fiat currencies. It's already getting quite hard to do so. And once we really head into collapse, it would be very hard to do so. So to me, it's really about owning the precious metals now and having the physical precious metals somewhere and having a fair amount of it outside the country that owns you, the government that says they own you. As we know in the US, they confiscated gold in 1933, so this isn't anything that's never happened before. So this is going to be a crazy and wild time, and so I would recommend to people to have a fair amount of physical bullion because it really is safety. It's no one's ever gone broke owning gold and silver. It's always been worth something, and we're going to have a lot of people going broke over the next few years as this massive financial and monetary system collapses.
Yep, and nobody has gone broke owning gold and silver, but they certainly have owning the mining stocks. So let's end up on the mining stocks here. You were saying earlier to me that relative to the market, I'm seeing it today, the market's down 270 points. We're recording on Friday, December 11th. Many of the mining stocks are up or even right now. So what do you think is going on the last couple months with the mining stocks?
Well, definitely, it's been a bloodbath, especially recently. We just saw Anglo American lay off, I believe, 70% of its workforce. So we're really seeing the what should be the final bottom of what's been going on since 2011. There's in the commodities and gold and silver as well. It's just been going down since 2011, and so we've really been around the bottom now for about a year, in my opinion. And it looks like we're very close to the bottom. I've said this for about a year, that this is close to the bottom. It's not going to get much worse. It can't get much worse. This has been a total bloodbath in those markets. But that also means it's an amazing time for anyone who does want to invest now. And sure, it could be a few more months before it really starts to turn around, but we're very close to the bottom here. And I think if you pick the right stocks at the right time, you have the potential for 1,000% gains or much more than that. That's what's happened in the past with these stocks when they've gotten beaten down this bad, and really hasn't been this bad, I don't think, ever for the gold and silver mining stocks vis-a-vis the price of the metals. And so it's looking like a huge speculation to get a position in some of these stocks right now and over the next few months. And if we do see a turnaround, if gold and silver start to turn around and go up, which I believe they will, especially as we start to have this collapse, then these stocks will go up exponentially. So it's definitely another, just like Bitcoin, another thing to speculate in.
All right. Well, Jeff, I want to thank you for coming on the show again. And before I end, you do a much better job than me. You have several different things going on in February. If you could share the dates and how our listeners can get more information on that. And, of course, a little bit about your website.
Sure, yeah. It's just the Dollar Vigilante. You just go to dollarvigilante.com and you just put your email there and we'll send you our blog almost every day. We write something. And we're also going to have a conference in February right here in Acapulco, Mexico. February 19th to 21st is in Acapulco, which is the world's largest anarcho-capitalist conference. We're going to have lots of entrepreneurs, investors, all kinds of amazing people coming to that conference. And the day before that, on February 18th, is the Dollar Vigilante, or TDV, Internationalization and Investment Summit, which is going to have a number of great people, including Austrian economics fund managers, a number of the top Bitcoin people. So we'll be talking about how to put your assets into Bitcoin and secure them safely, which hardly anyone knows how to do. We're going to have Trace Mayer there, who's one of the experts in that. We're also going to have Roger Ver, the Bitcoin Jesus, at the conference. So a lot of Bitcoin talk, a lot of precious metals talk as well. We're going to be talking about many of the things that we've been talking about here, but with a lot more experts, and right on the beach in February in sunny Acapulco, Mexico.
Yep, a lovely place indeed. Jeff, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Colin.
Think you understand the junior mining sector, and you think that the participants in the mining sector, junior mining sector, are good people and kind people, hit the bid.
And the world is always going to need raw materials. It's going to need copper and gold and nickel and so forth.
Totally destabilized. Hey, troll, did you hear what's going on in Yemen? Or are you too stupid?